Oh, oh man, it has been a really long day. Make sure this is okay. All right, I am recording. I really love this, the red box thing, knowing that you're recording. Super helpful. It's on the GH5S, and I really like that feature. Anyway, so shooting on the OM1 right now, and this isn't really a full review or anything. This is just kind of like a little tidbit just so I can have something to upload. But I really do think that this camera is the perfect jack of most trades camera. And I think in my opinion, it's the best sleeper. It's a sleeper cinema camera. Best sleeper cinema camera. That doesn't really make sense, but it's a sleeper cinema camera for sure. The Olympus branding is usually not, it's usually the last thing you think of when you say cinema hybrid. Rightfully so, it lacks in a lot of ways for most video shooters and production filmmakers, but the OM1 is better compared to the EM1s in terms of video quality. On top of that, it's a very good for photography and punches well above its weight. It's not heads and tails better, but it's noticeably better in a lot of the ways that matter for me. Overall image quality, if we were just talking strictly about overall image quality, every camera made in the last decade or so is generally very good, and it typically depends on what type of photographer you are and your tastes. The general photographer wouldn't need anything out of this camera and would find the EM1 Mark II to suit all of their needs just fine. So how is this a sleeper camera? Because that's what I stated, and that's probably what I'm going to be calling this video. To set a small disclaimer, the general video features added to this camera is better, but it's not a GH6. By the way, watch Rhett's channel for some juicy GH6 action. An Olympus body finally has 10-bit internal. It autofocuses great in video. It doesn't have as much of that digital sharpness and log that this had, EM1 Mark II had. It has HLG, which is something I use in the GH5S, and this makes turnarounds faster. The color science is better in the EM1. It's better in the OM than it is in the EM1s. Yes, Olympus has always had great color science, but it's better now. And this is something more evident in video footage as opposed to the raw photos. The raw photos don't show as much of it. It doesn't really show that much of a difference in terms of the color science, but for some reason it does in the video. Now, it has more dynamic range. I still have to test that in the photos. I don't think it's as evident in photos, but it is very evident in video. There are several little caveats. That is a bit annoying, but I'll get to those later. Overall though, it looks fantastic and it is much more improved. What makes this a sleeper cinema camera and something that is actually usable on a micro budget feature, if you are given the chance to use it in that way? And it's the ProRes RAW. The ProRes RAW coming out of this camera is another level, and the experience of shooting ProRes RAW is now practical and usable on a set. What I mean is everything that made the EM1 Mark III and the EM1X a bit problematic when you shoot ProRes RAW is fixed. The screen, it doesn't black out when you're shooting in ProRes RAW. That was always a confusing thing to me because I don't think there were any other cameras that screen would just black out when you start recording in ProRes RAW. It was only in the EM1 Mark III and the EM1X, but that's fixed. The OM1 doesn't have that problem anymore. The additional crop in ProRes RAW no longer exists, and it's way more detailed. Well, maybe, I don't know if it's way more detailed, but it's definitely able to recover more information than what was in the EM1 Mark III, which the EM1 Mark III was already impressive. It even recovers highlights better than the GH5S. And here's the weird thing, the GH5S has a 14-bit sensor, and this is still just a 12-bit sensor. So I don't understand how it can actually recover more information than the GH5S. It makes me think it can actually recover more information than the Zcam E2, Zcam E2 M4, and the Kit Affinity, Terra, 4K, every single Cinema Micro Four Thirds sensor, I'm more than confident that the OM1 can recover more information and is more detailed than every single one of those cameras. You can actually, another feature that was missing from the ProRes RAW in the EM1 Mark III was the ability to change white balance in post. You can actually do that in this. The noise pattern has less of those color blotches that made the EM1 Mark III's footage, ProRes RAW footage, a bit ugly. That was something I dismissed before. And this is only because I hadn't really shot with ProRes RAW or really any video RAW footage with any other type of camera. Now, I would find, if I was comparing the OM1 footage and the EM1 Mark III and EM1X ProRes RAW footages together, I would find the previous ProRes RAW footage unusable in comparison. This probably doesn't sound like a lot to you, but it's a big deal to me because I probably would have kept the EM1 Mark III if the experience shooting video ProRes RAW was better. I love the GH5S. I would never have gotten the GH5S if I didn't sell the EM1 Mark III though. But regarding the GH5S, the GH series in general, why I've never really, I can't think of the word. I just was never really attracted to the GH5 body. The experience shooting with that camera is just not really favorable to me. There are other things that make shooting with the Olympus bodies great for shooting narrative films. But I want to talk about some of the quirks the OM1 has that simply doesn't make any sense to me. Regarding the 10-bit internal, it still needs a bit of improvement. While the camera's 10-bit and 8-bit is improved, the correction LUTs from the manufacturer are not. So you do have to correct every piece of footage you shoot. This isn't that big of a deal if you're shooting a narrative, as you should be doing that anyway. And if you are just doing this for YouTube, the HLG profile is real easy to grade or correct or whatever. Speaking of HLG, that's the only format you can shoot H.265 in. And I love HEVC or H.265, whatever you want to call it. It's a fantastic and flexible codec, and it's the primary codec that I shoot all my personal videos on. It's what I use on the GH5S most of the time. So this is a welcome addition to the OM1, but this is also a bit of an annoying limitation. Its limited choice in codec doesn't allow it to be used if you're shooting video or for someone else or for a company that requires you to shoot footage for the shoot. Still trying to get used to talking in front of the camera. But if you're shooting with a third-party company, with a company, and they or someone another shooter, and they need that footage to be 10-bit H.264, this is a new experience for me. So this is something I'm just finding out more. The more I shoot video, and the more that I have more diverse clients. For most people, this wouldn't really matter, and until recently, it didn't really matter to me either. But in some cases, I'm not going to have the chance to take it home and convert the footage. Some of these gigs that I'm getting, they hand you the SD card and expect the SD card to be back to be given back to them at the end of the shoot. So for now, I'm just not going to be using the OM1 for those jobs. Another annoyance is the external ProRes, standard ProRes, not RAW. This is still 8-bit 420 if you're dual recording in the body and into the Atomus. It's 8-bit 422 if you're recording directly into the Atomus alone. This is a completely strange limitation to me. The camera's pushing out a 12-bit 444 RAW signal. I don't get the limitation here, honestly. Hopefully that gets fixed. Another bit of a weird annoyance, in ProRes RAW, it still requires you to record 16-bit audio instead of 24-bit audio. The OM1 can record 24-bit audio. The Atomus can record 24-bit audio. The GH5S can push out a 24-bit audio signal while it's recording ProRes RAW. So this is just a strange limitation. This is the same limitation that was in the EM1 Mark III. So if you're finding that you're not recording audio while you're shooting in ProRes RAW, it's because you have your audio set to 24-bit. Speaking of audio, it's better, but it's not equal to Panasonic. Panasonic's internal audio, as far as I can tell so far. I'm still testing it out. I know the GH5S had really clean audio, I haven't actually played enough the internal audio. I typically use a Tascam to record, and then I sync it. So this is actually just the second time I'm using it, and I haven't actually heard it yet. So hopefully it's clean. But it does have 24-bit audio, so it's easy. It would be easy to clean. One thing I do wish it did have was an XLR adapter. I'd honestly pay for a video firmware that allows the OM1 to have all the GH5 Mark II video features. I'm not even asking for the GH6 features. I want the option to shoot open gate. This is a fantastic video feature. I'm finding that I do need to be able to shoot 10-bit H.264. I know it could do so much more. It's clearly punching above its weight in a lot of other categories, so the processor is powerful enough. Raw photos is actually more intensive to process compared to video. So if it could shoot 120 frames per second raw, full 20 megapixel 12-bit raw files, it should be able to do video quite easily, honestly. But yeah, those are the little quirks. I stated earlier that this is a sleeper cinema camera. Now, is ProRes enough to consider this a cinema camera? Well, honestly, yeah. The OM1 has all the ingredients. It has DCI, 4K DCI. It shoots 1/48 shutter, which is actually perfect 180-degree shutter for 24 frames per second. Funny enough, though, those features are not even things that you'll find in some more expensive cameras that are considered cinema cameras. And if you're using an Adamus, you get all the tools like false color, waveforms, and LUT upload. You pretty much have all the ingredients for a cinema camera. Yeah, I'll say it again. It has all the ingredients that it needs to be a great cinema camera. To be honest with you, what is even a cinema camera? Film shot on iPhones have gone to theaters. Film shot on mini DVs have gone to theaters. If you're trying to make a narrative film and you're trying to learn filmmaking, actual filmmaking, this is a great camera. The OM1 is a great camera, but so is this camera, and so is an iPhone. The OM1 is a big step forward. It's proof that OM, this new company, can make something great for paid video shooters as well as wildlife and sports shooters. It really is truly a jack of most trades, but not all. Hopefully, in the future, they'll add more codecs, fix that annoying 24-bit audio in ProRes RAW bug, and allow it to shoot 10-bit 422 external for non-RAW ProRes. So is this a worthwhile upgrade to the OM1 Mark II? Yes and no. This really just depends on the shooter. Are there better cameras for paid video gigs? Yes, and for a lot less money, which is something I have to consider and weigh. But the OM1 so far is my favorite camera out right now. But this is mostly for personal reasons, not practical. For more personal photography, I am finding myself grabbing the OM1 more and more over the OM1 Mark II, and that is a feat to accomplish because I've had this camera, this very camera, since 2016. And in that same time, I've had the A7S, A7S II, the Canon 5D original and Canon 5D Mark II, the Canon C100, the Panasonic GH3, GH4, GH5S, G85, GX7, and I've had 3 Blackmagic Pockets, which, man oh man, that OG pocket camera is still my favorite filmmaking camera of all time. Blackmagic, can you please update that camera? I'd love a actual just digital Super 16 camera. Or if someone wants to hand me a digital Bolex, that would be awesome too. This camera just brings out that need to shoot for me. I really do love it that much. The way it sits in my hands, just begging to be shot with. And sometimes that's all it is. It's as simple as that. If the FX3 or the A7S III does that for you, get that. If an iPhone 5S does that for you. Use that. Whatever it is that you need to get to actually use it, get that. But remember, filmmaking isn't video making. Filmmaking isn't the specs of a camera. It's more than that. Filmmaking is about the heart, the soul, and the struggle. It's that need to tell a story. It's not fancy edits, it's not crazy motion graphics, it's not slow motion, it's not the color science, and it's not the algorithm. Filmmaking is human. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching and have a great day.